And then when the slides are shown, it'll be bid on the screen. You know who's sharing? You know who's sharing? Somebody. Share a slide. Rebecca, can you pull up a slide, those questions to make sure it's working?
Sorry, Erin, did you ask me to pull on the slides? It was hard to hear you in that mic.
Yeah, we just want to test and see if it's showing up.
Okay.
Thank you.
That mic is not very easy to hear from. And somebody does not have their headphones on. Mindy. Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, if my mic is working, can you hear me if you're online?
Not clearly.
Not clear.
Yeah, we're sending a check in.
Okay, we are in a pause here. We're waiting for a text to come down so that everyone is on the online. So we just recorded it. Everyone's following.
That's definitely the sign.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a quorum?
We have a quorum. I understand that, but they can't hear us, so.
We can hear you just fine, Dr. Burke. I think it was that one microphone.
Oh, okay. If you can hear me, just.
You were crystal clear.
All right, thank you. Okay, if that is the case, I am going to call our meeting to order this morning. Good morning, everyone, on this balmy week in Indiana. We have down there in Evansville, they're having wonderful weather, and up north around Valpo, oh, you're going to get a little snow up there, it sounds like. So anyway, but here we are. A lot of snow. Well, Judith, you're hardy folk and you're used to it up there. Huh? Okay, everyone. Well, the meeting's called to order and I'm going to do roll call. I do believe we have a quorum today, which makes me really excited. So let me call roll this morning. Margaret Smith. Margaret, are you on today? Katie Elman.
Good morning. I'm here online.
Good morning. I'm here. James, are you on? James Gunn?
His name is.
Your name's on, but I'm not hearing you, James. You must be muted.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Thank you, James.
Thank you.
Becky, you are here. Judith Shun
Here.
is here. Kelly is sitting next to me. Deb Lambert's across from me. Jennifer Lance
Good morning.
across from me. Dan, are you on?
I
in
am.
Mustard?
Yep, I'm here.
Yep, I see you. Hi.
Hello.
Okay. Megan, are you on? Megan Springer? Oh, glorious day. We have 9. We have a quorum.
Oh, happy day.
Yes. So the first thing I'm going to do, it's not on the agenda, but we do this anyway. At least I don't think it is. The minutes. We have minutes from previous meetings that we filed. And Dan, I think you went over the minutes for this past meeting. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I'm asking if we could have a motion to approve the past meetings minutes and the minutes that are filed.
Motion approved.
Okay, Jennifer has made the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any additions, corrections, or comments on minutes? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. Okay, now we have elections. So I called a meeting of the virtual meeting of the executive committee, and we did put forth a slate. So I'll read the slate, but we also are open for nominations from the floor. I said I would be willing to serve one more year as chair, if you want me to. We do have a vacancy for membership for a VP, so we'll need a nomination from the floor for that, at least a nomination from the floor for that, if not for these other offices. Katie said she would serve as VP of programs again, presentations. Judith said she would serve as VP for partnerships, and Dan said he'd continue on as secretary. So what I'm going to do is open nominations from the floor. Is there not any other nominations for chair? You want to put up with me another year?
Yes.
Okay, VP of membership. We have no one in that role right now. Is someone willing to step up? Now that means talk with people about serving on the commission. Becky? Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Becky, if I don't say your name right, tell me. Becky Anspaugh? Anspaugh. Okay. From Logansport.
Well,
Area.
yes.
Okay. Any other nominations for programs? VP of programs. Katie's willing to serve again. Anyone else want to be on the slate? Okay, VP of partnerships. Judith's willing to continue in that role, but if anyone else would like to be considered, or you'd like to put anybody forward. Okay, Dan has loyally been serving as secretary. Anyone else want to be on that slate or nominate anybody? Okay, if not, here's our slate. Chair would be me, VP of membership, Becky, VP of programs, Katie, VP of partnerships, Judith, secretary, Dan Mustard. Okay, can I have a nomination?
The slate.
Deb has moved to approve the slate. Do I have a second?
I will second.
Katie, Kelly seconded. Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Wow, we got elections done. I don't think we've done that in a few years. We had I'm excited. We got a lot going on so far. Going very smoothly. Okay. Katie, I'm going to turn this over to you because we really, we've done some planning for presentations, and then we had so much going on with our Pathways program the last year. Some of that got changed. So Katie, who is VP of in charge of programs, wants to talk with the commission, and we need to make some decisions. Katie, you're on.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Burke, and good morning, everybody. I'm Katie Ellman from Evansville, Indiana at USI. So for those that I don't know, and I've been working on this programming as the vice chair for a couple of years now. The first year I was involved with this, we had some speakers scheduled and kind of filled in some gaps. Last year we talked either in November of 22 or maybe it was January of 23, and our group brainstormed ideas, and we decided that for our programming segment of each meeting, we would take a deeper dive into our advisory committee reports. So some of you as chairs of the advisory committee then stepped up either to provide a deeper dive into the work of your committee yourself, or the idea was that you could delegate that to a subject matter expert in that area if we wanted to increase the knowledge of our group as we're learning about the work of the advisory committees. So my question to the commission members today is, do you want to continue that work with our advisory committees and through our programming sessions take a deeper dive into our topics, either by having the chair share a little bit more about each of the committee's work, or asking a subject matter expert in Indiana or beyond to join us? Or do you want to go a different route where we select some topics of interest of ours that are important to the work of the state and go that way? And if so, perhaps we could have a brainstorming session about that. So I'll pause now to get some insights from the group.
Well, I'll
hate-
speak first.
Oh,
Hey.
go ahead.
Sorry.
No, you're fine.
I'm sorry. I'm having a little bit of a grumpy morning. I have spent the whole night at Laurel's Hospital. My grandson got diagnosed with diabetes, so I've had no sleep for a couple of days now. So if I sound a little cranky, I'm sorry. I hate to make it so our committee becomes just us. I really think that we need to hear the information from outside, from everything that we're looking at and the different things, aspects that we're looking at.
So it sounds like Judith, is in favor of inviting
The third option.
the third option, which would be individuals outside of the work of our committees. And how about the rest of the group?
So this is Deb, and I think given that we are about to go through probably the biggest sweeping changes in our Medicaid program that will affect, tens of thousands of citizens. I don't even know how many people are Medicaid. I should look that up. Could be hundreds of thousands. I don't know. I think it's really important for us to keep that focus as the pivotal focus, especially since the budget was off by about $1 billion, and 500 to 600 million of that was specifically for home and community-based services, which is largely the people that we represent as part of the Commission on Aging. I just think that we need to really try to stay ahead of this, and I'm very concerned with some of the potential solutions that I saw in the press release, in the email we got yesterday. So that is my opinion.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Deb. And just a refresher to this group, sometimes our selected programs from this, from 2023 did get replaced, as Dr. Burke mentioned, with pathway speakers, some different topical sessions on that as the state was moving forward in this area and continues to do so. Any other general thoughts before we kind of move into kind of decision making and maybe some brainstorming?
Well, I can speak for the housing committee, and the more we dove into that, I think the bigger the issue became for me. I mean, it's not really my area of expertise, and we tried to pull together people who are experts in that area. And even then, there are so many groups who are taking a look at housing. I would be in favor of reporting out on what we have discussed, but at the same time, I think doing a hybrid and having somebody who really has their finger on the pulse of what's happening with housing. It's going to be a huge issue as we move forward, and as the population continues to age. It's one thing to have funding available for services, but we also have to have locations. There have to be suitable locations in the community, whether it's a person's home, whether it's shared facilities, group homes, whatever that looks like, as well as staffing. I mean, there's just so many aspects to it that really go beyond the scope of what our committee could even address. It's one thing to gather the information, but then when it comes time to trying to find solutions, that's a whole other topic. So, I would welcome the opportunity to share what we have learned, but also at the same time, we probably need to hear from somebody who really is deep into this.
Great. This feedback is really helpful. So far, it sounds like we're thinking of, or this group is proposing reaching out and finding some external experts that can talk about some selected topics, and or continue the work that we've done with asking the state or a delegate to discuss where we are with the Pathways program. Am I hearing the recommendations? Is that a summary? Or does anyone have anything to add or edit to the thoughts?
I'm in agreement with that, Katie. I think it is good to have those outside experts at this point, but I think it is critical that we have people in each meeting that can discuss pathways in a way to actually provide answers. How it is projected to go is not exactly gone that way as of yet. And we know throughout this entire year, we're going to need a lot of information about that. And so I think it's important that people can speak to the actual relationship with who's providing pathways and the specifics of how that member experience is going to be, how it is right now and how it's going to be throughout the whole year.
So would the group be in favor of maybe asking our Aaron and our contacts with the state if we could have an ongoing report at all of our meetings like we have for the last year regarding the progress? And if we need any more specificity on that, specific topics related to that, we could request that of our colleagues at the state in preparation for these meetings. And then maybe some topical areas that are important for our, so it may be two separate things. So instead of one program speaker, I'm hearing maybe two separate speakers each meeting, maybe one with connected pathways and then another one that allows us to take a deeper dive into some of these areas that are important. Of course, some are related at times, right? But is that the framework? Is that a framework that, am I hearing you? Does that sound like the framework? Or we could alternate, but I'm hearing that we want some update on the Pathways progress at each meeting.
I think that's Katie. That's right, Katie. And we still, I mean, if you look at all of these committees, there's a lot of incredibly important work going on. So how do we find the balance of, Dan, the housing crisis, right? And keeping that in front of this commission and thus, other bodies, governing bodies in the state. I think about the work that I'm hopeful that we'll do on family caregiving in the coming year. So some combination of, and, perhaps greater dialogue amongst this group about what the priority is from one meeting to the next, and trying to get organized on those thoughts, because the priorities do seem to shift somewhat based on what's happening. Like a big priority is the guidance that was issued yesterday around how the state will be managing the budget shortfall. So I think we have to have some flexibility in setting those agendas as well, in
Yeah.
partnership with the state.
And I think too, with looking at the advisory committees, I think what we may find as this pathways rolls out, I'm working on emergency housing, or our committee's working on emergency housing. We may see an uptick, and then that's going to be a focus, or we may see an uptick with housing supports, as the goal is to get more people out of nursing homes into home and community-based services. Well, we have to have some place physically for them to live. So I think some of this will naturally kind of come to the surface as well. But I think the key thing is that we be very flexible and nimble in who we bring to the meeting and what we have on the agenda based on what we're seeing at the moment.
From a planning perspective, I can totally appreciate that. And I want to say, let's plan for the year, but I'm hearing maybe that's not the recommendation of the group, but at least if we could get 2 meetings out by topics that sound important, because I know from a planning perspective and getting the right people, we want to get dates on people's calendars, and that's a little bit of a logistic, but that way we're not at the last minute trying to identify somebody, recognizing that we could ask somebody, like if a higher priority item comes up, maybe we have somebody scheduled, we could ask them to back into the next meeting if there is a higher priority item. I'd like to talk about potentially who we'll have for our next 2 meetings, which would take us March and May, I believe. Is that sound like a reasonable direction to go? And then we can think about the last 2 meetings of the year, last 3 meetings of the year, when we get to May.
Well, I think Dan wanted to do a presentation, and I apologize. I didn't get that on the agenda for the housing with support. So Dan, I think you wanted to be on for March. Am I correct?
Yeah, we can. And I think that the other thing that I would point out is that when we're talking about housing, one of the things that came up very early on in our meetings was that we need to be careful that we're not only looking at housing in relation to pathways, but housing is an issue for most folks as they age. And so we don't want to get ourselves into a situation where we're only hearing it in context of pathways. It's a bigger issue that we need to have that conversation across the board.
Yeah, and just let me add on that. As I look at the statute regarding the Commission on Aging, it is to address issues related to older people in Indiana. And we do act in an advisory committee, please help me if I'm off on this, to the Division of Aging. Okay, yes, okay. So that, underscores what you're saying about housing. Thank you, Dan.
Hey, Katie, this is Judy.
Yes.
NICA, AAA is doing amazing things with housing right now. So if you could try to see if you could contact with them, Jen Trowbridge, and see if she can come out and explain what's going on, because she's doing amazing things with housing right now.
Is that to replace Dan's presentation?
No, just to add to his.
Same month, or would you think that we would want to do housing for 2 meetings, one in March and one in May?
Totally up to you, and you would have to talk to Jen Trowbridge and see what her schedule is.
How does the rest of the group feel about Dan in March, and then a subject matter expert like the person Judith mentioned in May?
I think we could tentatively do something like that, but again, I don't know what's going to spin up as the more pressing issue as we move through our meeting today and get nearer to March. So if we put Dan on for March and tentatively say we could continue on with housing in May if nothing else is pressing, but I have an idea there'll be something pressing.
Yeah, I wonder, Dan, if there's an opportunity for you to connect with Jen Trowbridge. I mean, hers is not focused on pathways, it is housing in general in those communities. So for you to be able to connect with her and then present to this board what you learned in that conversation as part of her housing, as opposed to having them as 2 separate. Is that
Yeah, I
Is
can
that a
certainly do
reasonable-
that. If somebody could, Judith, if you could pass on her contact information, I can reach out to her. And it may be that we tag team a presentation, or I can present information that she gives to the group.
I can get that to you.
All right, thank you.
Post her name and the connection in the Zoom chat so I can document it for our planning purposes for this group.
Okay.
Thank you. And then what about a topic for May, knowing to Dr. Burke's point that we may shift it, but I'd like to get somebody scheduled so the state, so just for planning purposes, topic wise.
I believe personally that with the transition happening in July, I know that we're not just focused on pathways as a commission, but that's a significant milestone. So we need some type of updates about both the health and wellness, the transition of families to the health and wellness waiver, as well as those that are transitioning to health plans. So we know that in April, beginning in May, families will begin being auto-enrolled into a health plan if they've not already selected a plan. So there's going to be a lot happening, in that April, well, from now to July through the end of the year. But I think it's really critical that we have some updates from the state on those transitions.
Okay, so maybe a focus area on that, and I can get with Dr. Burke and Aaron to see who our speakers would be on those topics.
Preferably OMPP.
Are we yes or no coming from FSSA?
We don't, I don't think we can speak for OMPP, but I'm sure they would be.
Okay, because that will require OMPP, if which we have asked that they be involved, since that's we have to look at everybody. Okay, all right. What are we calling that, Kelly, for a topic? Somebody help me with this. What wording are we using?
It's really about the broad
Enrollment, it's the
waiver
it's the
transition.
MLTSS enrollment and how the progress is that's what I heard you say.
Waiver transition? Do we need to get more specific? I think they know what we want, so they know what we want. Okay, so that's going to be May, because there'll be some big changes happening in April. Okay.
Dr. Burke, do you think I could get on the agenda for May then, so we can discuss again for the rest of the calendar year?
Okay, and we need to get, yes.
Thank
Aaron
you so
says,
much.
yeah, we will.
For your
Okay, well, we'll keep you on the agenda every time, just so we can know where we're going with our presentations, Katie, okay?
Thank you.
We'll
for
just keep you there.
brainstorming. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. And, we did these advisory committees. These areas came up and we did the advisory committees because these are all linked to changes that are happening with the Medicaid population, but also across the state. So we can add, we can take away, we can do what we want to with our advisory committees. The advisory committees reach out to areas, people on the advisory committee who are experts in that area too. So it's beyond just us. So, but just keep that in mind. And if you have ideas for additional advisory committees or changes, let me know. This was just an attempt to get more voices heard at this table. Okay. All right. Anything else on programs, Katie, or you okay?
I just asked if Judith can put the person's name and affiliation in the chat. Thank you.
All right. Do you have anything else, Katie?
No, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. That helps us greatly with moving along with that. Thank you, Katie. Okay, we are ready for the FSSA updates. And first on our agenda is Shannon Epler. Thank you, Shannon, for coming.
Thank you for having me. Okay, Rebecca, would you mind pulling up my slides? Okay, so good morning, everybody. I'm here to provide some progress on our dementia care specialist program development. Would also like to highlight that this could be a topic that you may want to consider having regularly on your agenda. A lot of great work happening with the Dementia Strategic Plan and then also the Dementia Care Specialist Program. So I serve as the state's Dementia Strategic Plan Coordinator, and I'm also the Director of Geriatric Programs for IU School of Medicine. So first want to remind you, because it's been a little while since we've talked about this program, what are the overarching goals? This, the impetus for this is House Bill 1422 that was approved and since then has been put into Indiana code that Indiana will operate a dementia care specialist program, and that's under the oversight of the Division of Aging. So overall, and I'll use the acronym DCSP, meaning Dementia Care Specialist Program. This is, the Alzheimer's Association has a national initiative to encourage all states to operate a program such as ours. So we're not alone in this. Other states have these types of programs. Every state does it a little bit differently. So I'll talk about the progress we've made on ours. So first, what are the goals? So ultimately, it's to improve the quality of life, care, and services for persons living with dementia and their care partners. I'm using the term care partner versus caregiver. That is really the most up-to-date, appropriate term. So those of you may know it more largely as caregiver, but I'll be using the term care partner. It is to evolve Indiana's aging network to a dementia-capable system, including the training of AAA staff who interact with people living with dementia and their care partners. So really providing that internal training. So this, I guess I should mention that what this funds is 1 FTE at each AAA to serve as what we're calling the dementia outreach specialist. They're the ones who are really implementing the program, okay? So they will be providing internal training and education within the AAA to make sure that the AAA is knowledgeable and equipped to serve this population. It will increase public and community awareness of dementia and clinical and community resources available to support people living with dementia and their care partners, including early screening opportunities. It will help with relationship building, educating and facilitating collaboration with other community-based organizations and healthcare providers to increase referrals to clinical care coordination and community resources in support of people living with dementia and their care partners. I think you can really view this as just a way of really strengthening and building the infrastructure in Indiana around dementia services and the knowledge base of what the heck is out there and how do I access it, and making sure that all Hoosiers, right, this is for all Hoosiers, have information on that. Next slide. So I'll talk about what we have completed, what we have done. So it also, what's been put into code is that the Division of Aging will have a full-time role dedicated to managing this program. So I'm calling that the DCSP manager. So the job description for that has been drafted. The DA has approved it and forwarded it on to SPD, which is the state's HR department, and they are in the process of processing it. We have looked to and reviewed best practices from other states. I've also had conversations with folks who have a similar role to mine in other states to learn from them about how they are operating this program. We've convened a stakeholder work group. It includes FSSA staff, I4A, the Alzheimer's Association, and the Alzheimer's Resource Service with IU Health. We came together as a small but mighty stakeholder group to really draft the scope of work for this program, right? I wanted to make sure that stakeholders were at the table every step of the way, especially that AAA representation was there every step of the way, as they are the ones who are going to be implementing the program. We've drafted the scope of work. So we sent that, the stakeholders, we drafted it and we sent it to AAA leadership for their review, comment, input, feedback. We then convened all of the AAAs together and had a meeting with them about the program. They're very excited. Some of them already have very similar roles to this, that they're paying. They found a way to pay for positions like this, and they already have them. So also learning from their expertise and experience with this. We finalized the scope of work, and it is with the DA for processing at this time. And then I mentioned the dementia outreach specialist as the key role for this program. We've drafted the job description for that. So we wanted to provide the AAAs with a template that they could easily use for, modify it to fit their agency's practices and policies, but they could easily use to post. Also making sure that this is standardized somewhat across the board, right? That each AAA has a similar, whoever's assuming the role, they have a similar skill set, a similar background. They understand the responsibilities of the position. So we have drafted that, and it is now with the AAAs for their review and feedback. Next slide. So I talked about what we have done, and we are working on the following items. So posting and hiring of the manager that will be within the Division of Aging, right? I mentioned that that is with SPD. Develop program evaluation metrics. So I'm working with the stakeholder group to identify what is going to make this successful, right? What are we aiming towards? What do we need to achieve? So we're really working together on that and getting feedback from the Division of Aging leadership as well. Once we have that developed, we will send it to the AAAs for their review, input, and feedback, and then we will edit it. I'd like to develop a program manual for the AAAs that really provide some structure around the program and help to answer just really, basic fundamental questions in hopes of making sure that we're all on the same page. We do, a real goal of this program is that it's going to serve the community well, and each community is different. So we want to allow the AAA to be flexible and operate it, but we also want some things to be standardized to make sure that we're all moving in the right direction towards our goals. And we are hoping to launch the program in Q1. So we are hoping to launch it in just the next couple of months. And I'm happy to, next slide, answer any questions or field any discussion on this program.
What's the ultimate output of this worksheet? And so you said you're going to be working on evaluation metrics. Who will you report out to on performance after a year's time of this program up and running?
Well, welcome input from anyone else with the DA and from Kristen as well, but largely legislators will want to know because this is in code and it was a House bill. So they will want to know exactly what are the metrics, like what are we doing? How is this money being used? Some preliminary program evaluation metrics that we're most likely will be included are things like number of trainings completed, number of educations that were completed, collecting data from having a pre-test of those trainings and post-test, collecting data on that, referrals. So you saw that one of the goals is building relationships with healthcare providers so that they understand who they can refer to. So number of referrals tied to that outreach and relationship building. So those are some of the metrics we're considering at this time.
I think the data is also going to be shared with the Dementia Advisory Committee. So, and it will inform the state plan on aging. So there'll be a number of entities that have eyes on this data and outcomes. And Shannon mentioned this, but we're really trying to focus on more of the clinical side of things with this position, and looking at making those clinical referrals rather than kind of general community awareness and welcoming of people with dementia, such as Dementia Friends. Mm-hmm. So it's really trying to get into healthcare.
I'm not sure people online heard
yes,
what.
Kristen. Sorry, you have to repeat yourself now.
Good morning, everybody. Kristen Lais with the Area Agencies on Aging. To further respond to Kelly's question, the data will, in addition, be shared with the Dementia Advisory Committee relative to the Dementia Strategic Plan. It will also inform the State Plan on Aging. In addition to the legislators that approved the appropriations. So there'll be a number of eyes on the outcomes. The other thing that I wanted to stress, which Shannon mentioned, but I wanted to make sure, because it took me a while to be able to articulate this pretty well. We're really trying to focus on clinical health outcomes with this grant. That's why we talk about, we stress making the connections with clinicians in the communities, with the community services, like getting into care management with waiver or other kinds of services that can support those clinical outcomes, the health-related social needs. Some of our other dementia-related initiatives in the state are more about community awareness, about community acceptance of people with dementia, about integration, living your best life in the community. But it's really focused on kind of like dementia funds, making sure that people understand what dementia is and they're not afraid of people with dementia, or they know how to interact with people in dementia in positive ways. So this, it's more focused on the actual clinical outcome as opposed to making a broad, inclusive community experience. I hope that both are important, but we felt like the clinical piece was somewhat lacking in some of our work.
It sounds like it's very much focused on growing the care partners' knowledge, understanding, and ability to impact the clinical outcomes of that individual. Rather than like a community awareness, it's growing their knowledge.
Okay, so we've got kind of this dementia friendly community. Yep. Separately, there is also the Aging Brain Center program that 10 of the AAAs are currently implementing that deals specifically with the care partners. So this isn't, it will educate care partners, but it is not meant to supplant the dementia care coaching that the AAAs are already doing in that program. Okay. So there's kind of three things happening: broad community awareness, dementia care coaching. Now let's look at the clinical connections and make sure that we are referring appropriately to clinical services, that the clinicians know to refer back into community health-related social needs, can make the connections with care management, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so yeah, it took us all a while to really figure out how do we make this unique, given everything else that is going on, how do we fill that gap with this particular initiative?
And just to add, we all, in this room live and breathe this, so it may be surprising to hear that a lot of clinicians, especially primary care providers, don't really know they don't know the resources out there. They don't know the services. They don't know necessarily how to connect someone that comes into their office with dementia. And so that is, to Kristen's point, a big part of this, about creating that awareness among the primary care provider community of Indiana.
In working, boy, am I getting up there in years. In working for 50 years in healthcare and social services, it is absolutely astonishing that if somebody has dementia symptoms, all of a sudden, healthcare does not know where to go with this, and it gets avoided as if the brain is not part of the body. 50 years of this, it's like, because they don't know what to do with it. And that connection is so vital. So it's the integration of we're calling it something else now, not social determinants of health. But anyway, it's the social in with social care, in with healthcare. I don't know, that may not be the correct wording, but you know what I'm talking about. Finally, dementia is not even considered in behavioral health. It's like, wait a minute, folks.
Mhm.
Those clinicians don't deal with it either. It's like, well, if you got dementia, you're out there, well, your primary care physician doesn't want to touch you. The behavioral health doesn't want to touch you. And neurologists are like,
Give you a pill.
so this is wonderful news. Thank you. Thank
You're very
you.
welcome.
Hard work, I'm sure, in Indiana to get this together. That's not easy.
It is, but very rewarding. So I think it is something that, is something we can always look to at this meeting to talk about the positive work and all of the great work that is happening in this area. So thank you all.
Thank you, Shannon. And I made a note to get updates from you in this meeting. So
Okay.
thank you so much. Okay, moving along. All right, Pathways, member communications update. Shayla Pinner. Shayla, thank you for coming.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I am Shayla Penner. I am the Deputy Communications Director for FSSA supporting DDRS and Division of Aging. Just going to be really brief, just letting you know what you probably have seen out in, I say the wild, but out in the community, and what you can expect to be coming. So right now there are billboards, commercials, paratransit on some buses, and then out of home. So those are our pharmacy signage. There's also, the commercials are also on YouTube. Those current commercials will change the call to action at the end of this month or beginning of February. So right now it is just directing everyone to the new Pathways website, where we have a host of frequently asked questions. Now there is actually a comparison plan of all of the plans now that was recently updated. That call to action will change to enroll now come February. So all of those billboards, all of that messaging, the commercials will flip just at the end. So the commercials will stay the same, just the end card will change to say enroll now versus learn more. In February, each member will also get a notice, one of several notices, just letting them know about the plan, what they can expect, and how to enroll, so that them or their caregivers can give a call to Maximus. So enrolling in Pathways is 87 Pathway 4. So that information will be in those notices. We also are having some regular communication touch points with our stakeholders. So that is AAAs, providers, and the MCEs. We are also updating the website. So in.gov Pathways. We have promotional items. So we are encouraging folks to go out to the website to download or order brochures. There are flyers, and that will continue to grow. One thing I will know is that we are consistently changing and evolving our communications tactics based on feedback and just needs. We will also have several weeks of outreach in March with Advancing States. They are going to do some member outreach for several weeks in engagement with our team to make sure that folks understand what's coming, answer some more questions. We are also working to develop some more materials. Some of our providers have asked for more materials that they can actually have on site. Some of our stakeholders have also asked for that. So we are trying to meet with folks and figure out what works for the populations that they are serving, so that we make sure that we create something that is easy to digest, short, brief, but gives enough information for folks to be able to make informed decisions, or at least lead them to the information bank for informed decisions. Members will also get a letter about 60 days prior to their start date, their planned start date. And then MCEs will also reach out and they'll get an enrollment packet. Just to note that a lot of the public facing marketing and things that you're seeing will run through July. So they will run through the beginning of, or live date. That is where we are now. All of that started November 1. And so we are, like I said, we are continuing to update our website. That is our hub of information, not only for members, but also for our providers. We are asking them to, in our community stakeholders, so AAAs, we are directing folks there because we are hosting a ton of information there to make it as easily accessible. One thing we are also working on it's just creating a kind of a plan so that before folks are ready to enroll and they don't feel unprepared, that we can provide an idea of what they need in front of them or their caregiver needs in front of them to enroll. So that is something that we are working to develop and create.
Thank you, Shelley. I just want to share some little humorous to me, but my older son's 50, and he said to me, why am I getting this Pathways material coming on my social media feed? I don't need the services. I said, you missed the point. I'm going to be moving in with you, and I'll be living with you, and the services will come to your house. You missed the point. And he said, oh, is that what that was supposed to mean? Just thought I'd put it out there.
Absolutely. There are two audiences. So we have our members and then we have our caregivers. So that was targeted for him. He just didn't understand why.
He didn't get it. I bet he's not the only one that doesn't get that message, because we taught Indiana to go check in your loved one at the nursing home and apply for Medicaid. And oh boy, things are changing, aren't they? Fast. Oh, yeah. He said, oh, I missed that whole point. And I said, mm-hmm.
Well, that's good. We know that it's reaching the audiences we want.
I had just the FYI, we had an interesting conversation yesterday with PACE organization where in Northeast Indiana, who their members are seeing these commercials and thinking this is about PACE because it talks about access to transportation and meals and like all those things. So they're like, are they talking about us and like PACE? So
Okay.
Just some
good to know.
feedback. Yeah.
No, thank you. Good to know. Any other questions or? Okay.
Okay, well, thank you so much for the update. Andrew, you get to come and we'll get in a really interesting discussion.
I'm going to keep my updates brief because I'm going to yield the floor to my colleague, Kathy Robinson, for the forecast conversation and everything. So she'll get to have the more interesting conversation this morning.
Okay.
But Shannon mentioned sharing some good news, and I wanted to make sure that we highlighted on January 8th, Governor Holcomb announced his next level agenda, and part of that was a multi-sector plan on aging to be delivered by organized by the Division of Aging, and to bring in multi-sector partners from across both the nonprofit, from public, private, and independent sectors. And this will be a 10-year plan on aging that will focus on kind of the growing aging population across the life force. I know Dan mentioned, we have a Medicaid population, but there's, I think, 1.5 million aging Hoosiers outside of the Medicaid population. And so wanted to just flag that for this commission so that that we are wanting to work with pretty much all stakeholders, including the commission, and wanting to make sure we incorporate ideas from the commission into this multi-sector plan. We are currently kind of working on the logistics of how we kind of roll this out and everything. So we will have more information for the commission very soon, and very hopefully within, I would say, the next month or so, in terms of how that's going to look and everything. But we want to pretty much invite all partners to participate. This is going to focus not just on healthcare, but also housing, transportation, employment, income security, looking at really a lot of things that we don't necessarily talk about in the aging space currently, intergenerational interaction between younger adults and older adults as we move towards having a larger aging population. We're going to have to rely a lot on our younger populations to both be caregivers, but also in terms of economics, that younger population is going to be smaller too. So how does that work in an economy and everything? So I think we're going to be I'm really excited about this, and I wanted to make sure that the commission knew that we definitely want to engage the commission on this as we move forward, so that we can move beyond just, the Medicaid population is incredibly important, but also the aging population that's out there outside of the Medicaid population is very important as well. So just wanted to flag that, and if there's any questions, happy to take them, but I can turn it over to Kathy too to have the interesting conversation as well, Dr. Burke. So.
Well, that's good news to hear. The Older Americans Act covers everybody, not just people on specific programs. So you were part of that. So
yes.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Kathy, you get to lead us on an exciting discussion regarding some of the, You tell us what you want to call the discussion.
Well, for the record, this morning, my name is Andrew Bean. So it is what the agenda says. So we'll go with that in the event anything here goes awry this morning. Sorry, colleague.
You might want to talk with a little deeper voice then.
Right, I know, I do need to channel that a little bit. I have joked I'm going to start speaking in an English accent, maybe just to see what people think. So thank you for the conversation this morning. I'm grateful that I was able to listen to this group think about the coming year, and obviously timing with our announcement and information that came out yesterday probably was well suited to inform you all in thinking about what are the priorities for the coming year for you all, but in the broader sense of the Medicaid landscape. And so that is why I am visiting you today, is to talk through that a little bit. And
Could you introduce yourself?
I'm going to introduce myself. I think you guys have seemingly remember me, which is a good thing. But for those online or others who are not familiar, I'm Kathy Robinson. I'm the Associate or Deputy Director for the Division of Disability and Rehabilitative Services. And I have been tagged for this conversation for realistically because I have been in front of you before talking about the waiver transition, and that has been my role within FSSA for the past year or so, is really helping to execute the parallel kind of activities that have been occurring with the planning and implementation of the Pathways for Aging waiver program, which is really some shifts and realignments that are happening with the other home and community-based services waivers operating in FSSA today, which would be the 59 and under population currently on the aged and disabled waiver, and the traumatic brain injury waiver population that would be shifting to the Division of Disability and Rehab Services on the scheduled timeline with the Pathways implementation. So that's coming up here in July, which for all of us, I know, is 15 minutes from now. So we have a lot to do in a very short amount of time to do it. I have been also obviously brought into this discussion around the Medicaid forecast because a lot of the activities that we have targeted are tangentially connected to the waiver transition work that is already kind of on its path. So I'm going to talk to you about the Medicaid forecast, which it sounds like you all are aware of. So I won't spend a lot of time digging into that, maybe just putting some finer points on some things related to the announcement that came out, the waiver transition overview and kind of where we are with that. Some of the things that you're going to see in the second round of public comment is those waivers went back out yesterday for another 30-day round of public comment. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what we changed and why we changed it, as well as what we did with the public comment that we received, because we did review that initial round of public comment and actually where we could incorporate some of those changes. So that's by and large what I'm going to talk about. And I anticipate that will take the remainder of our time, as I assume that likely you will have questions. I have a lot to go through, and so I would just say have your pens handy and maybe write your questions down at the end so that I can make sure that I'm touching on all of the salient points that I think you want to hear about this morning, and I don't run out of time and I'm able to get all of those pieces covered. So does that work for everybody, and everybody kind of have a good sense of where this conversation is going to go? And I do have my notes because I want to make sure that I hit on some of these topics in a manner that I feel like is succinct and reflective of some of the communication that we're trying to be more pointed with. Really, I want to talk a little bit about the Medicaid forecast. As some of you probably heard it, Cora and Dan presented the State Budget Committee and talked about the variance, which, oh, sorry, next slide, please. So we reported out at that forecast discussion a $900 million variance from the April 2023 projection. When we talk about the $900 million, that is the state share. So that is not the total amount of projected variance. That is the portion of the variance that is associated with the state share. So if you know, there's the federal Medicaid match associated with and our state portion, which is either usually varies between 70-30, 60-40, somewhere in that range, right? So I don't know the specific percentages as at this moment, but that is the finer point I wanted to just touch on here is ensuring folks know that it's more than that. This is the state portion that we're talking about. So as we were looking at that variance, we really wanted to understand what is driving that and really specifically what is driving it. So we've been really working hard to continue reviewing the data, policies, our existing approved waivers and the current waiver drafts to just better understand the drivers behind the variance. I think, you know, our attempt here is to truly understand the issues that that are influencing and the drivers behind the variance, and in order for the approaches that we take to address the variance to be specific to the drivers, if that makes sense. So some of you may know in past we've had budget variances before. We've taken different strategies and approaches to deal with those things. In this circumstance, we are looking at what are the things that are driving to that variance and causing that delta. So the strategies that we're going to walk through are going to be really specific to what we have identified in the data that tells us we believe these things are driving the cost variance. And we're also trying to the best of our ability to focus on all the people that we serve in Medicaid and recognize that we have current agency initiatives that we would like to preserve to the best of our ability. So going to the next slide, I'm going to just touch on at a very high level the drivers of the forecast variance. And these are just some examples. So this is not an all-inclusive list, but these are probably primary drivers that we can touch on. We do know that we're having a decrease in our federal FMAP, which we would have anticipated, just not necessarily knowing exactly what that percentage is. That happens on an annual basis. Pharmacy rebates, I won't go into this a ton, but just recognizing as the cost of prescriptions go up, the rebates that the state has available to us has not gone up proportionally. So we lose essentially the ability to regain some of those coupons, if you will. Delayed implementation of ABA rates. And so many of you probably saw we were trying to do some rate methodology work on ABA therapy this year. We had an anticipated rollout of that in the April forecast. However, we delayed implementation of those ABA rates to do some additional stakeholder engagement. ABA is applied behavioral analysis, and that is a service that is heavily utilized for folks who have autism. And so they will go to receiving ABA services through like an autism center or other supports, either in home or in clinic. The other area that I'm going to spend a good amount of time talking about with you is the age and disabled waiver and the unanticipated growth in enrollment and utilization on the age and disabled waiver, and particularly attending care. So when you're looking at all of these drivers, we have tried to assess what does this look like as far as impacting that projected shortfall, right? What's this look like compared to the 900 million I just talked to you about? This represents about 300 million. So that we have not closed that gap entirely at this point in time. These are the things that we have found are primary drivers, but they are not, in our estimation at this point, going to totally solve the entire shortfall. And that is partially because we don't necessarily have the ability to put a specific dollar amount to some of these strategies in a way that can really put a finer point on how much impact we think we're going to have. So I just mentioned that to you because the gravity of that shortfall is still pretty notable, and we still have some ways to go in order to really make a meaningful impact in some of these areas. So I'm going to talk about the areas both within the waivers and kind of outside the waivers that we're going to be strategically implementing here very quickly, because as you might recognize, this is a projection. These expenses have not incurred yet. So this is what is being projected in terms of if the trend continues, this is the spend that FSSA and Indiana Medicaid will incur. And so we're trying to implement strategies quickly, because we know that the further we go into this fiscal year and this fiscal situation, the less impact our strategies are going to have on that overall number. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the related rate of utilization for attendant care, but we're also going to go into some of these other areas that I just want to touch on. Next slide, please. So we took two primary strategies here. I think we looked at strategies that would help minimize the overall impact to recipients as a whole for Indiana Medicaid, and a focus on strategies that actually address the specific drivers of the forecast. So we also did identify some broad strategies to minimize the impact of the projected forecast, and I'll also talk a little bit about those here next. Next slide. So two things that I want to talk about here that are broader in impact, that are definitely not specific to attendant care or specific just to the age and disabled waiver, but are areas of our fiscal picture that we know could potentially have an impact here. So the HCBS Enhanced FMAP, that is you'll hear us talk about ARPA funds. And those are those additional federal dollars that states during and post-pandemic have been getting as a way to sort of stabilize our systems and provide ability for states and home and community-based services to build infrastructure and better sustain home and community-based services post the COVID public health emergency. That's a significant amount of funds. FSSA had a proposed plan for how to utilize those enhanced FMAP dollars. We're revisiting that plan, what funds are potentially available that could assist in addressing this shortfall and be used in a manner that is permissible by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, because as they released these additional ARPA dollars, there were some specific requirements in terms of how those funds could be used. So they can't be used to supplant existing initiatives or existing things. They have to be used in a particular manner that we're currently evaluating how we might be able to leverage that as a resource. The pause on the 2% rate indexing, so I'm just going to talk a minute about this. The last legislative session, the legislature did a number of pretty notable things. You saw that there was a notable rate increase that took effect and was retroactive to July 1 of 2023. That was a substantial investment into our overall home and community-based services. That was hundreds of millions of dollars invested into our waiver system in order to effectuate rate changes, but ultimately the intent of that was to also build a starting point for rate methodology work to create some consistency and predictability within the home and community-based services rate methodology work. And so that was a much needed step for waiver services in order to really understand what is the true rate and how can we start to build in some predictable rate indexing for future increases to happen on a schedule, or for rate methodology work to happen on a more uniform schedule in a predictable way for providers to know when those services are going to get looked at again for particular or specific rate adjustments. That has occurred, and we are not looking to remove that rate increase. In fact, we feel like that is a critical piece of the system that we absolutely don't want to touch if at all possible. And so within the approved budget for those rate increases, there was also an allowance by the legislature to allow for FSSA to build into our waivers a 2% rate indexing formula to get us to the next budget session. And so we are pausing that because at this moment in time, based on the fiscal information and situation I just talked to you about, we do not feel like we are able to do that 2% rate indexing at this time. What you will see in the waiver drafts is we did not remove it. The 2% rate indexing remains in those waiver drafts as a way to preserve our ability to potentially implement that at a future point in time should our budget situation change. So I won't get into the technical details, but it's much easier to make that change once it's already in your waiver than to have to put it in and go through the process of getting that approved by CMS. So the pause is truly a pause, and that's why you'll see it still represented in all of the waiver drafts, affected waiver drafts that are back out for public comment. Next slide. All right, so I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this slide because this is where I know Deb in particular has some concerns, as mentioned earlier. And I want to make sure that we spend the right amount of time. And I will say, I do have notes, but if you have super specific questions, please know that you can contact me directly with any questions that you have, because I am helping the FSSA team really lead the path in trying to get this implemented. And we want to make sure that we're hearing from people what their experience is or what maybe some of their concerns might be. Again, as a reminder, these were identified because we can see within the aged and disabled waiver that some of these areas are large contributors to that variance. And so we're just making some adjustments here. Some of these things you'll see articulated within the waiver drafts, and some of them you won't, because we actually don't need waiver approval in order to execute them. Bless you. So I'm going to spend just a minute talking about the review of service plans. And so you may or may not know the states, as many other states that operate waivers, utilize some auto approval logic where certain plans or certain services get flagged for a state team review in order to look at that plan or that service request from a quality assurance or compliance kind of standpoint. And we provide assurances to CMS that we are doing that in a manner that ensures that the services that are being authorized are based on the service definition and what's authorized by federally for waiver services. So we are taking a look at those service plans and what elements are being auto approved today. And so there'll likely be some adjustments to that auto approval logic so that the state team actually takes on more of the manual review component of some of those plans that are coming through. That's not to say that the auto approval process will stop. It will just change the way in which we have structured our quality review process in some of these areas. I think you'll see that happening more specifically on the home and community assistance service, structured family care, caregiver coaching, and community transition, as well as attendant care. Again, we still have to operationalize this in our systems. However, in order for us to understand better some of these other bullets, they're somewhat interconnected. We'll be looking to implement this probably in mid to late February. So that's the time frame for that change. Again, a lot of these time frames that I'm going to be sharing with you all are quite soon. And again, that's because we do feel compelled, given the gravity of that shortfall situation, to implement things relatively soon. The service definition compliance. And so this is somewhat connected to those service plan reviews. But really, this is our strategy to really figure out our services being delivered as appropriate and as defined in that CMS approved service definition. And this is where we're seeing maybe there's some operationally differences in the way in which some of those services are being delivered. And so we'll be doing some training with providers and with care managers around this, just to level set a little bit and ensure that everybody is operating under the same expectations. One of the other things that we'll be doing, particularly as it relates to the home and community assistance service and attendant care, is really taking a closer look at those two services in particular, because what we're seeing is maybe a little greater alignment there than maybe there should be. So trying to further delineate those two services from each other so that it's a little bit more clear when each of those services would be utilized. You will not see that in this, the draft amendments that are currently out for public comment. We need some time to get some input around that. We need some time to talk to stakeholders and really frame that out in a future amendment, likely in 2025, because some of you may know we already have planned another set of amendments at some point in 2025. So we'll do some time, we'll take some time with that particular piece of that to make sure that we are really looking at how those two services are being used today and how we might better define them going forward. Structured family caregiving provision. I'm going to talk about that. I'm sure Kelly is not interested in this at all. And I want to just note here, this is where we have already gotten the massive amount of communication around concerns that people have with this particular item. And I want to just spend a little bit more time on this item and to ensure that we are clear in terms of what we are and are not doing at this point in time. In the currently approved age and disabled waiver, this is the provision of services by legally responsible individuals, and legally responsible individuals for our purposes is a spouse or it is a parent of a minor child, not a guardian, because that's for CMS's purposes, that's a separate, I'm looking, the waiver document's a separate checkbox. Okay, we're talking about legally responsible individuals. The current age and disabled waiver, as it is approved today by CMS, does not allow legally responsible individuals to provide paid care to their loved one. I do understand that that operationally has not been the way that that has been communicated. However, we are learning that the way in which we have defined those services within the age and disabled waiver does not actually give us CMS approval to do what we're doing today. So we are and have been in communication with our partners at CMS about all of these things, because obviously we wanted to, one, make them aware of the identified variants that we have encountered, but we also wanted to talk through with them what strategies we are looking to employ. And so they know that we're dealing with this issue, that we know that we have a compliance concern, and that we are trying to course correct. In the meantime, this is where I think there's maybe been some concern or confusion about what we're doing about that. What you will see in the next few days are a couple different pieces of information that we're going to be posting for publication and for access by stakeholders. One is we have lots of waivers out for public comment right now, and people have 30 days to review all of that and give us feedback. We recognize that's not a lot of time to fully digest everything that we proposed in the first round of amendments, what's coming forward, what are the new things that we're proposing, what did we change because of the public comment. And so we have a recording that we're going to be posting online that walks through all of this information for stakeholders to say, here's what's changing in the community integration and habilitation waiver. Here's what we originally proposed. Here are the new items, and here's what public comment we got and what we changed. We're going to do that for each waiver so that families can go in, stakeholders can go in and watch this recording to help digest information that you would otherwise have to go and read all of the waiver documents to really truly understand the nature of those changes, to try to help people follow along with what's happening, and also be able to provide some informed public comment to us before the end of this public comment period. So that is a piece of information that is forthcoming. It will likely be posted even this week to have families be able and individuals be able to access that information. The other thing that we're also working on is some additional guidance and FAQs and information about what legally responsible individuals can do today and what does that mean going forward, particularly as it relates to attendant care. This is, it happens in the home and community assistance service as well, but the attendant care is where we see the significance and potential growth of utilization for attendant care for the population of folks currently on the age and disabled waiver. Because we have a compliance issue, we are saying we can't really in good faith bring new people into that legally responsible individual service arrangement on attendant care or these other services, because we know that it isn't allowable now. And we also know that we're working toward a longer term solution that we feel like can appropriately support the need in this area. So you'll see us put out some information about this. I think one of the things that we're trying to stage for stakeholders and affected family members is that this is not allowable today, but we are not stopping existing LRI situations from continuing to occur today in attendant care. So if that is happening today, if you know a family member or families that are providing, let's say, paid care to their minor child under attendant care, and they are the legally responsible individual, they are the parent, we are not telling them that they have to stop that today. So I just want to make sure that that is clear, because we've already gotten some communication that's concerning. I think that we're concerned that families are misunderstanding maybe where we're headed here. What we are saying is today, you probably do need to be thinking about what is your transition plan, because as becoming July 1, with the implementation of these updated waivers, we will have to move into a compliance space, and legally responsible individuals will not be permissible to provide attendant care on those approved waivers. They will be able to provide structured family caregiving if they are an LRI in July. So nothing changes for folks as of today. Nothing is changing for them in April. Nothing is really changing for them until they get to July and they need to transition into a different service model in order to continue what they're doing today. They may also say that service doesn't work for me and I can't do that. And so I'm going to have, we're in this window between now and July, I'm going to identify other ways in which I get those attendant hour needs met, either through a staff person, another relative, or other way to have those services and supports delivered. Or I may choose a different service arrangement altogether because I just need to really revisit my plan from a service and supports perspective. So we felt compelled in this last week to start that notification process, not to upset people, but really to just let people know now so that they can start planning for, people need a window of time to actually plan for a transition like that. So giving people between now and that July timeframe to really be meeting with their care manager, talking with their providers and teams, to really thinking about how do we shift here, and what do I need to do as a family, as an LRI, what do I need to do if I want to continue to do this going forward? So just know we are working on some additional communication around how do you do this? What are the steps you need to take as a parent? Who do you need to contact? Where's your first step? And how to start that process. And I know Jennifer's thinking about this, but also how can we support care managers in knowing what is the right information to be sharing with individuals and families about what's going on, what's not going on. Because I think we know this is a shift for people. We know this is challenging. We still do not have a complete plan that fully addresses that shortfall. So we are really thinking about how can we best support this population, knowing that there are some critical support needs that need to occur for the families and for the youth and kids in particular on the Asian disabled waiver. How can we best support their needs? And so that is the path that we're taking with structured family caregiving. One of the reasons we have really tried to identify this service, and it seems like I'm giving some shameless plugging of structured family caregiving, but I think it's understanding that there are some existing mechanisms built into that service that make sense for service provision by LRIs or legally responsible individuals. So having the respite component included in that for individuals, for family members to be able to have access to get that necessary respite time. Also to have some of the provider support and backups for those emergency situations that the service definition really kind of mandates and requires. Better helps and I think positions families to actually get into a service where they can get those support needs met on a continuous service model that supports that, but also gives that additional nursing check-in, the additional support strategies that naturally are embedded as a part of that service. And so that is why structured family caregiving was sort of our solution or proposed path for families who are in this LRI situation today. So we're not making folks change paths immediately right now. We are highly encouraging and recommending that people start having these planning conversations as soon as possible, because for a lot of people, there would be some steps involved in making some of these changes or planning for some of those changes. So I know that you're going to potentially have some questions about that, but I just wanted to spend a little bit more time commenting on that one in particular and some of the why behind why this is the potential planned path for us. That is not to say that we might not revisit legally responsible individual like in other service models or services in the future. However, an element here that I think is not maybe as transparent for stakeholders and for folks who I think sometimes assume we know a lot of information about people that we don't actually know. So with attendant care and some of the services that are authorized there, we can see some information. What we can't really see is who actually are legally responsible individuals who are providing that care today. And so one of the things that we are, one of the strategies as a part of this is trying to start collecting some information from teams about what's happening for folks in this space today. It isn't to be invasive. It really is to try to help inform us as a state team on future planning and how we best need to support teams who are having some difficult or potentially challenging planning conversations. And so I say that to say, you know, there'll probably be some information or requests for information coming out that we're going to be working to gather some information. And that is really just because we need to understand this service model as it stands today. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services are very open to states letting parents of minors and spouses provide that paid care. In fact, they very much encourage it, and when we have talked with them about our landscape and our current situation and how we would move towards that. And so I want to note that yes, CMS does encourage this. However, with lots of other elements of our waivers, there are strings attached to doing that service model, which is that the state has to have protections in place to ensure that people are not exploited or taken advantage of as a part of that service arrangement, and that we can show, if requested, we could show all of the steps that we are taking to make sure that those conversations are happening on a regular basis, that there are checks and balances in place. As you all know, as individuals age and become adults, if they ever were to decide that they no longer want their family member, their parent to provide that paid care, their ability to actually communicate or share or say, I don't want to do this anymore, is very limited, especially if that is that family's sole source of income. So we are really trying to take some steps here to be thoughtful, to build our own infrastructure so that we could actually support this in a way that we feel like we're doing it with fidelity and we're doing that consistently. We are not in a place today where that is occurring. So that is part of this consideration and part of why we are looking at this in the manner in which we are today. This is also where I would say, if folks have other ideas or strategies or even inside the box or outside the box. I think we're open to hearing from people in terms of how we might do that differently, how we could reorganize the service array or redefine certain services to better meet this need. Because obviously we're going to be continuing to look at the LRI component. As many of you know, we're working toward that 2025 waiver amendment. And within that amendment, we're working to actually introduce greater self-directed options. And in that, there could be additional space for people to really be thinking about how some of these needs could be met in that model, where people are able to really more pointedly direct their waiver dollars themselves toward the staff that they want to hire, how much they want to pay that staff. And that is also a staged implementation that we are internally working on. So just wanted to give you guys a little bit more of the nuts and bolts to that. I know that there'll be some additional questions, and also as you all are getting questions, please feel free to send them our way, so that as we are providing technical assistance or guidance around this issue, we can better be responsive to some of those questions or help direct people in where to go and how to think about this transition period. I want to just move on to the pediatric eligibility. And this is really, I think, for us, thinking about how we do pediatric eligibility. Really, this, as we were looking at the Age and Disabled waiver, the NRI HC tool is currently the level of care tool for nursing facility level of care on the Age and Disabled waiver. It's a decent tool, however, I would say for youth and particularly for kids. It's not necessarily maybe as great from a developmental standpoint in terms of really truly getting to some of the concrete needs that age group probably has, and doesn't really differentiate youth from adults in a way that feels functional, if that makes sense. I know, you know, asking certain skills from a child that wouldn't really developmentally be appropriate for anyone, and so other than the adult population. So it really is for us an opportunity to take a look at that pediatric eligibility tool. We are not making changes to our level of care tools across any of our waivers. The NRI tool will continue to be used. What we're really talking about here is making sure that the tool that we have, that we are managing today, that we are appropriately trained, the people who are doing those assessments, that we are doing an appropriate level of the, going back to the first bullet, of what level of review do states have responsibility for, and looking at those level of care determinations from a fidelity standpoint. And then thinking about and using some data from those activities to really talk about what our future planning is. And really trying to assess that, not just with the Age and Disabled waiver, but probably across the agency and across the BEADS waivers as well, the CIH waiver and the family supports waiver. As you know, as we moved into this July time period, all of those waivers will fall within the Division of Disability and Rehab Services at that time, and that will be an opportunity for us to look at that to say, how do we do a supportive assessment that families can maybe just do the one time? And that would tell us, where should you go in the waiver system, as opposed to saying, well, go get your assessment on the for the Age and Disabled waiver. If you don't meet that, come over here and you'll do your assessment for the IDD waivers and see if you're eligible for that. Instead of putting people in that situation of going through these different assessment doors, our vision is that we would look at how we would do that in a more family-friendly manner, so that we can do some assessments and say, based on these assessments, this appears to be the waiver you're most appropriate for, that you meet the eligibility for. You still have the same rights and protections with that process that anyone would have, but it really is to better recognize within one division, we have the ability to consolidate some of that effort, but also do a much more thoughtful assessment that touches on those developmental expectations for youth in a way that probably we're just not doing to the degree that we feel great about today. So you'll see here some additional trainings that we'll be doing with the people who are doing those level of care assessments and just level setting. Again, not changing the current tool as it stands, but probably looking toward 2025 or sometime in that time frame to possibly introduce or look at introducing different tools for different populations, if that makes sense. So that is one that has some short-term activity associated with it. When I talk about 2025 and implementing a new or different level of care option or tools, 2025 is still not that far away when you think about that. So you will be starting some planning and coordinating conversations soon, just internally, to be thinking about how do we set the stage for that if that's the direction that we feel like we need to go. Expedited waiver eligibility. Some of you know that's been in play as part of the public health emergency. That was really an initiative from FSSA to try to get people through that waiver door more quickly. We had some conversations and engagement with, with CMS. Had too much coffee this morning. Had some engagement with CMS around this. They were on board with us implementing an expedited waiver eligibility program statewide. However, with obtaining approval from CMS to do that, there were several components that they really wanted us to come to a mutual agreement with them on how we do, and that is the verification of Social Security number and citizenship. We were doing that pretty okay in that smaller phase, in that initial phase where we weren't doing it statewide. However, as we started to get into this broader implementation, that process actually proved to be a little more cumbersome than I think we anticipated, and was actually taking more time than what we really were trying to achieve with that expedited waiver eligibility goal in mind. So we are pausing that until we have an ability to right size some of these things and also identify some potential other pathways to some different pathways to implement that in a way that makes sense functionally for us to be able to manage on that broader basis. The last item is related to waiver slots. And for those of you who, I'm just going to do a quick, what is a waiver slot? My favorite topic. So the waiver slots are, it is the unduplicated count of people who are being served within a waiver and within a waiver year. The aged and disabled waiver year starts on July 1st. So the current aged and disabled waiver has an approved amount of slots, which means it's the space that Jennifer or Deborah or Joanne would take up in the waiver system. So if a person, let's say, is onboarded onto the waiver and it is that they started, let's say, in July, because that's when the waiver year starts, but just hypothetically, they came into the waiver that July, and then their family moved out of state. In September, they moved. We can't backfill that waiver slot until the next July. So that, regardless of how long they stayed in the slot or why they left the slot, it stays vacant until the next waiver year. Just giving you some technical information, because we have within our waiver drafts not increased the number of waiver slots for the aged and disabled waiver, which is really the pathways and the health and wellness waiver. Those two waivers do not see an increase in their waiver slots for this state fiscal year. In recognition of the earlier slide where I said we had unanticipated growth in enrollment and utilization on the aged and disabled waiver, we may likely encounter a situation where we run out of slots in this waiver year, potentially around that March or April timeframe, based on internal projections that we're looking at the pace of growth of people who are coming into that aged and disabled waiver. If that occurs, we will, as a state, need to implement a wait list for the health and wellness, or actually for the aged and disabled waiver, because this will happen before July 1. So what we are doing now is staging
This year,
this, yes.
this year, okay.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
we,
Okay.
based on our projections, we appear to be on track to run out of slots in March or April of 2023. Okay, so that's here in the next 60 days or so. If that occurs, we will need to implement a wait list because we do not have, and we have not increased the number of slots on that waiver. In this situation, we would implement a wait list until the next waiver year starts, which would be July. So if you're following along between the months of March and July, we have the potential to possibly run out of waiver slots. That's not to say that we absolutely will, because some of these strategies may impact that trend in some manner. We don't know. If it continues to grow at the pace that it is and we run out of slots between now and then, between that March and July timeframe, we would implement a temporary wait list until the start of the next waiver year. At the start of the next waiver year, which would be July, we would onboard all of those people who are waiting onto the aged and disabled waiver at that time.
Just a quick question.
Mhm.
So since you are projecting that you're going to run out of slots in March, I presume you've also projected how many people are going to be on your wait list. Can you give us that idea?
I don't have an idea today. We just know it's based on the current trend. We will hit the number of targeted slots, but I don't have the number of like how many people then would end up on the wait list because we don't know exactly at what point, if that would be March or April, that we would run out of those slots, and then who's coming in to onboard those folks, what would happen to the number of people and what that looks like. So I don't know the number of that specifically today. But what we'll start doing is start tracking slots on a pretty regular basis within FSSA to better understand how close we are getting to that slot number. Does that make sense?
Well, whomever is projecting your slots would have a projection. So I don't know who that would be, and
Sure.
maybe if you could just follow up.
Yeah.
With that would be great.
Okay. Yeah, I will do that. Okay, so I spent a lot of time on this slide. I want to just, knowing the time we have, I want to make sure that I leave time for some questions. Rebecca, I'll go ahead and have you go to the next slide and see what additional pieces I can maybe touch on here in the next couple of minutes to make sure that we leave time for questions. So I know that some of you may know that FSSA has been working on some waiver redesign efforts for the past several years, particularly within the Division of Disability and Rehabilitative Services. Those activities have not stopped, and those activities will be ongoing. We have still a plan in place. As you all know, we're still actively moving toward a July implementation date. And part of the reason we want to stay on that timeline is because we need to implement some of these changes soon, but also position the Division of Disability and Rehabilitative Services to be the single entity overseeing all of these waivers. And so this is just as a reminder for folks, we're continuing down what we have described as a waiver redesign path. And so once all of those other waivers are not pathways, but once the health and wellness and the TBI and the FSW and the CIH are within the Division of Disability and Rehabilitative Services, we will start planning some next steps for how we can redesign all of those waivers to best meet the needs of all of those populations. As they are set and defined today, we have specific waivers for the IDD population. We have some of the specific waiver for the traumatic brain injury and for those folks who have nursing facility level of care. And what we have heard time and time again is people saying, I need this service off of that waiver, but I am on this waiver and I can't get it because I'd have to go over to that waiver, but I need these medical supports and services on this waiver. So I'm being made to choose and it isn't helpful. And so that is an area that we want to work to address. And we also want to work to address the overall waiver services and supports to maybe modernize them and ensure that the array of services and supports makes sense for the people that we're now supporting across those populations. We have not laid out what that looks like yet because we can't do that without everybody coming to the table and helping us think through strategically, what does that mean and what does that look like? And is that something specific for youth and kids? Is that, are they a part of that have their own waiver? Is there a different way, array or structure that makes the most sense as we're thinking about that? So I'm bringing this up to just say we're still on course to do this, but I'm also tapping your brains, and I know there's more emergent needs today, but this is something to file away, to be thinking about long term, and to start processing what does that future system look like, and how can that future system best support the needs of the individuals and families that we're talking about today. So that is just a more of a visioning kind of thought, but also just as a reminder and a restatement for people that we're continuing down this path and we're not deviating it despite the current situation with the Medicaid forecast. I am going to pause, and I have some other slides that are just a lot of stuff, but I want to pause here. I'm not going to go through each and every, there's slides in here that talk about every single change that we're proposing, and I don't think you all want to go down. I think I've exhausted you all plenty already. But I want to just pause and see what maybe thoughts or feedback or questions you guys have based on some of this information that I've been able to walk through, recognizing we have like 13 minutes left, and I want to make sure you guys have time to talk through some things.
First question I just have is, can we get a copy of these slides? Because I'm
Yeah.
a nerd and a geek, and I really would like to get into
I
the
appreciate,
minutia.
yes, I can relate to the nerd very much. So yes, we can get those to you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Under the BEADS waiver today, what is the definition of what is allowable with regard to legally responsible adults?
Not very much, if anything, is allowable on the BEADS waivers today as it relates to legally responsible individuals. We do allow on those waivers for parents to provide care to their adult children. And we do set some limits in the terms of the number of hours that family members can provide that paid care. And I think it's 40 hours. I'm looking at Jennifer like she has this all memorized. But I'm sure she does. She should not have that memorized. But we do set some limits and parameters. I would say we also have included within some of the, not necessarily within the waivers themselves, but some of our operational guidance lays out some expectations in terms of at that annual meeting or at different team meetings, having a conversation about whether or not the family members are still the most appropriate people to provide that paid care. Those can be very challenging conversations for anyone to engage in without really kind of, touching a nerve or creating some defensiveness. So we know that we have some room to grow on that side of things as well, but that is some of the way that looks like on the IDD waivers.
Will all providers be responsible for identifying on their claims where a legally responsible individual is providing care?
So we are working on that today. I'll look at I said I was Andrew Bean, so I can't do that. We are looking at some systems changes to ensure that we are capturing who are those situations where legally responsible individuals are providing care. And again, it is to just give us some insight into what that looks like. We're also going to be asking for recognizing we're navigating a compliance issue, but we're also trying to, again, not pull the rug out from under people. We're also going to try to ask for some disclosure information about, please just go ahead and tell us these situations where this is occurring so that we just have some insight into that. And also so that we can target some of our technical assistance and support to teams around that conversation in a way that is probably more productive than without it.
And I certainly don't want to dominate the questions, but I know that the strategy specifically calls out organizations, agencies that employ legally responsible individuals where structured family caregiving is not an employment situation.
Right.
It is a contracted situation. So I'm just curious whether SFC providers will fall into that reporting category.
I don't know if we've defined it that way. I don't believe we have. So I don't think that you would be, or the structured family caregiving entities would be in that boat, in that same boat. I'm looking at you because I'm.
Yeah, yeah. And then I'll just, one final question on the waiting list. So we could move to a waiting list in March, April. There are 50,000 slots in state fiscal year 2024. And that
Roughly, I think 50 or 55.
55.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, okay. And then I thought it moved to 55 in state fiscal year 25.
Oh, you know what? That's correct. I think that's correct. Sorry. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right.
So if we end up moving to a wait list in March, April, and come July, you reset those spots and put those people in the waiting list, what's the likelihood that before June 30th of 2025, we're back on a wait list?
I mean, there is a likelihood. Again, I think it depends on if that which for us was an unanticipated trend in that enrollment. So that is also, as part of some of these strategies, I think our team is also looking at what are the data collection, or what are the data pieces that we need to be regularly monitoring and looking at to tell us, are these strategies working? Are we going to get ourselves to Deb's point about, what is the number of people that would end up on that wait list? Like, we could probably project out and know an anticipated growth pattern from there to tell us, if we bring all these people off of that wait list into that waiver, how many slots then are left, and how closer then are we running out in that next fiscal year. I think if we see a slowing, or in that enrollment growth, that will affect obviously the capacity in those slots and what that looks like over time. But that is an area where our team is just going to have to do some really close monitoring and updates for folks to sort of give you a picture or insight into what that's looking like.
I guess I wonder just how the health plans, as they assume these lives and begin to look at the other lives that they're managing today, who might be eligible for long-term services and supports, what's the volume of referrals that they're driving to HCBS services as well? So we've got this push today, but what happens when the health plans have the option of pushing people towards services as well?
No, I think that's it's a good question. It's one that we've been also thinking about as we're considering kind of future state and what we're moving toward, and how those MCE pieces would influence that number as well. So it's a good question. It's a good consideration. I appreciate that.
So I have a couple questions.
Sure.
So I presume that, you said it's like the funding's like 60-40, 70-30. I presume we're the lower part of that. So then the total ballpark range would be like 2.7 billion.
It's probably in that ballpark. I mean, if you take the total amount and look at what the percentage breakdown would be, you're probably in the ballpark.
Okay, so then these changes that you're making are looking to make up the totality of that 2.7 and not just the one, correct?
Correct.
So I'm just curious what the expected savings are from the 2% rate indexing that you're going to do. I just want to see what size of piece of the pie is going to fix that.
I mean, I don't know that I have it sliced and diced that specifically. I think these, again, because we're in a projection situation, and we are also knowing that we're exercising some of these levers that, or strategies, I guess, what the actual dollar amount is for each of these things, I don't have. But could probably get to some kind of ballpark estimate in terms of what the indexing was supposed to represent in terms of the overall amount. But I think
there's some actuary somewhere that has any.
I'm sure they probably do. I think, and I know the inclination is to get into that granularity, and I understand even why. I guess what I would say is we're so far off from meeting the overall anticipated overage or projection that how that is sliced and diced at this point hasn't necessarily been central stage for me in terms of looking at
And I do want to say, I really appreciate you coming here and presenting.
Sure.
So I watched that hearing where they presented that, and I thought, wow, I'm not sure if I'd rather throw myself in front of an oncoming train, semi, I mean, fill it in with anything that would smash you. But
Yeah.
that had to be a very difficult thing to do, and for you to stand up here and do this. I'm guessing you're wearing Kevlar underneath. I don't know. But
I did think about it. I did think about that this morning.
No, but I really do appreciate your coming here to do this. Because like I said, that has to be difficult. And I just have 2 more questions and then I'm going to be done. So I think I heard you say that you're looking at, you've had kind of an auto enroll, and so now you're QAing that and going to do more human review of automated, like re-enrollment, whatever. Does the criteria change with the human element being added, or is this just a human making sure that the automated system isn't missing some flaggings?
Yeah, so that's a very good question, and it's not really changing. I think what it's more doing is giving us, we're not necessarily looking at the things that we feel like we need to be looking at based on where we're seeing some of these drivers and things that are influencing the overall forecast. And so we're really just shifting to say we need to pay a little bit more attention to these areas over here. And I think, as I mentioned before, kind of, why Andrew threw me under this bus today is, it is because some of these things were kind of already in a queue for us to be looking at doing as part of the overall waiver transition, where our teams, the BEADS team now needs to be trained on what's auto approved and what's looked at and what are you looking at. And so what we're really just doing is compressing that timeline to say we need to start actually doing that now, and actually getting some alignment and consistency and doing those things together side by side is probably the best way for us to actually achieve that. And in order to make sure that that doesn't feel completely disjointed from what they're maybe used to today.
So with that, I guess kind of what I'm getting a sense of is like it's a full court press to look at all these different waivers and basically make sure that people who are truly, by the definition of your waiver program, entitled to be on those waivers. So do you have any estimate of how many people may have gotten Medicaid eligibility who maybe didn't meet the criteria? You said you were saying something about checking Social Security and this, that, and the other thing. And so, I mean, is there some sort of estimate on like how many we think?
I don't know that there's an estimate on that. I think it's more of the mechanisms that we use to verify. There's a number of different ways we can verify Social Security number and citizenship, and CMS just has really strong preferences about what you use and how you do it and the timing of when you do it. And so we were not necessarily aligned with that, not necessarily disagreeing with them, but just our systems were not set up necessarily to actually do that functionally in a way that made sense. And so I don't know that there was an estimated number of people that we thought we were erroneously bringing on that weren't eligible. It was just the implementation of how we actually go through that process that we feel like is kind of flawed in terms of its design, and that we need to kind of go back to the drawing board to relook at it.
Okay. And again, I really do want to thank you for being here. I appreciate that. I appreciate your willingness to give us that information. And then unfortunately, I scheduled a meeting right after this, so I'm going to have to bug out of here. I just didn't want you to think I was storming out.
I was going to go back and be like, Deb got really upset and stormed out of the meeting. I do appreciate the sentiment. I mean, I think we have grappled with this quite a bit internally. I also, many of us are family members ourselves. Many of us have our own family members on some of these waivers. Many of you may not know my history with the state for approximately 20 years. My son was in the First Steps program, and that's how I came into the state of Indiana. He was born with some significant health and birth defects and he was on oxygen. He had a central line. He had an NG tube. He had an ostomy. Like, I'm familiar with the struggles that these families are experiencing. And we are very much trying to be sensitive to that, but while also recognizing we do have a bit of a mountain to climb in terms of addressing that shortfall. We are trying to do that in a way that is sensitive to those needs, but also preserves the Medicaid waiver system for everyone else. And so I know that part of it is really difficult for families. I can absolutely empathize with those challenges and very much connect with them both professionally and on a personal level. So just know that is the lens we are bringing to these issues. And we are, Andrew and I had a bit of a counseling session with each other yesterday of, we work with a lot of people who think that way. And so thankfully, those are the people that are looking at these issues in a way that hopefully, I know it doesn't feel like necessarily today that it feels disruptive and it feels challenging. But we hopefully are moving down a path in a way that is the least disruptive for people overall.
Well, thank you so much. And I just want to kind of speak from what I think is the population of Indiana. And that is, we're a state where we're conservative, tax averse, probably could better understand, not good people, but we could probably better understand public policy than we do. There's a lot of lack of understanding. People get enraged when they think they pay taxes and then they go to get something and it's not there. And that's what this is going to be probably for a lot of people. People not understanding what risk pools are, and they kind of put themselves out on their own with this without knowing really understanding how these things could be financed. But there's so much we can do, but there's also the reality that more of us are growing older in this state.
Longer.
Money is not lasting forever. We're going to have growing needs. And the way we set up our policies for funding these services is not to use risk pools, but to use general tax revenues. Well, you can't keep pulling money out of the cookie jar and not put money in it.
Mm-hmm.
And so state government can't be magicians printing, well, I guess the federal government can print money, but can't print money. So we're going to be challenged with these shortfalls as we have growing service needs. And it's just going to be something we're going to have to deal with, even though they will not be politically popular to do so.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for this. I anticipate we're going to continue to struggle because we do not have enough tax revenue allocated to meet the needs. And so nobody, and I'm going to venture because I'm not a provider, I'm not getting money from anybody, but I'm going to venture to say what we're starting to do is ration care. Nobody's going to want to say that. Nobody's going to want to hear it, but we're going to have some people with a lot of needs who aren't going to get services. I mean, when you start talking about slots, you start talking about waiting. It's just, there's nothing there. So anyway, thank you so much.
I appreciate the time and the consideration for your group this morning, and for what it's worth. I very much agree in terms of your thinking about your agendas for the coming year, and we're happy to come back and touch base with you all as it is necessary to do so, and give you guys some more information and updates as we move into this year. So thank you.
Thank you so much. We are over time. The advisory committee reports we're just going to put on hold till next meeting. Senior Center Coalition, do you have anything pressing you'd like to add this morning, Dan?
No, well, just having a brown bag action next Friday, the 26th. We'll be talking about substance and medication misuse among older adults. So you can go to the Senior Center Coalition of Indiana website to get more information.
Okay, Dan, thank you. Sorry for shortening your presentation. Kristen?
You want me to make a presentation? or-
Well, if you want to comment some, I'm sorry, but we kind of ran out of time today, but, do you have some things you'd like to point us toward?
Sure.
So I think the things I would highlight in your packet are what's happening in the Indiana General Assembly. We, again, included kind of from our perspective, what our legislative agenda was. We have a bill number, Senate Bill 231, that addresses the choice board or the choice issues. We are working to get a hearing on that. We are still looking for a place for the boards and commissions language that we discussed with you in the fall. Where we landed on that, we did simply update for the Commission on Aging the housing issue, just including a person from the Indiana Housing and Community Development Authority, rather than trying to specify a particular type of developer or provider. To address the issue on mental health, the code currently says that a member dealing with mental health, inclusive of dementia, which really isn't a mental health issue. So because there's an entire dementia strategic plan committee, advisory committee, we just took out the word dementia because we feel like there's enough attention with an entire group. And then all of you, of course, deal with dementia every day. So we feel like we'll get enough input without having to specify it. The other big discussion had to do with representation of congressional districts. And there was concern by some of the far reaches of the state that eliminating the congressional district language would diminish the input from the nether regions of the state. However, when you look at the current map of congressional districts, 6 of the 9 congressional districts include Marion County or the Donut. So we could have had somebody really wanting somebody from Johnson County representing Representative Clear's district, or we could have had somebody from, somebody really trying to get somebody from Southwest Indiana. Hey, they could have been living in Morgan County. So to avoid that, that's not really what you want. So we instead said, okay, we need like a certain number, like 3 from the AAAs in Northern Indiana. Regions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or something like that. The language is in here. And then we need like 3 from Central Indiana, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And then we need 3 from the bottom part of the state, which would include like 10, 11, 12, well, maybe 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And so that maintains the number of congressional district members that would have been required. It provides a little more flexibility in terms of how those persons are distributed across the top part, the middle and bottom of the state, and that we're not quite aligning with congressional districts. But it also precludes the possibility that the majority of those representatives would be from Marion County and the Donut. So we hope that satisfies everybody. We're still looking for a place for the language, so we don't know if will move forward. But that's where we landed. And finally, another important update is that Senate Bill 109, which is being heard this afternoon, would provide FSSA and Division of Aging with additional flexibility to contract outside of the Indiana Prosecuting Attorneys Council for APS services. And we feel that's really important in light of the impending final rule for APS that will be implemented nationally. The first national APS rule, administrative rule, with baseline standards for APS programs across the country. We feel like it's really important that FSSA have maximum flexibility in how they administer APS to meet those, whatever those minimum standards are going to be. This is not our bill, but it is something that we have advocated for as long as I've been in tenure with I4A. So we'll be there in support of that bill. So those are kind of the main things. There's a lot of housing stuff in there, and take a look at the federal advocacy update. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you, everyone. We've had a very busy day, but we heard quite a lot, and there's more work to be done. So everyone stay warm. We're going to get a little snow the next few days. And we'll see you in March. Thank you. Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. Bye. Bye, Jennifer.
Thanks for stepping in here on membership.
Well, yeah, she just put a kind of an update on the supportive decision-making group. I don't know if you want to read it or in the chat.
Okay.
Or I can just say,
Just read it to me.
supportive decision-making did an outline which the COA approved. One of the issues is space to tell a person who cannot have for themselves to tell their desires to care for them and other items being heard, or appointed special advocates when providing help, of course, guardianship and other providers. I did not have to know about this when I went to my state rep, and he was able to get permission for our guardianship court to do a pilot program.
Okay. Well, let's get that. over. Get it into the next meeting.
And then Dan complimented the IT support.
Well, there we go. You did better with that after you got going. Great.
Yeah, I think it sounded like it was a lot of the background noise that made it hard to pick up the mic, so.
Okay.
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 Oh, Becky.
I do actually. Yeah.
I did. I think I did. Great. Julie's not here, so I'm doing this for the first time, but I did hers easily, so. We'll try again. Yes. Yes, it's later during session, so it doesn't start until 3 o'clock.
Oh, okay, okay.
3 to 4:30.
The choice board meeting is late today, you're saying? I didn't get the choice board meeting's late today.
It is in January and March.
Yeah.
Because we're in session.
I think I'm gonna be virtual for that meeting.
Yes.